Chapter 5 Looking Back.
Hoagie was dreaming about playing hide and seek with Squirt when he awoke to the sound of loud squawking. He scurried to the top of the tree and peeked through the branches. Hoagie noticed what looked like a moving sea of pink in the sky. He squinted his eyes and realized it was a large flock of flamingos. Very carefully, Hoagie jumped up and down on the tree limb, waving his tiny paws in the air. "Joe! It's Hoagie! Joe! Down here!" Hoagie called out. A few flamingos flew close to Hoagie's treetop, curious as to why the branches were shaking randomly. "Flamingo Joe! Over here! It's Hoagie!" Hoagie yelled at the top of his lungs. Eventually, a large male flamingo tried to land on a thick branch close to Hoagie. Flamingo Joe looked around and was having a difficult time staying on the branch because flamingos were not perching birds. Joe finally found a tiny hand waving at him through the leaves. "Hoagie, is that you?" Joe couldn't believe his eyes. It had been a long time since he had seen Hoagie. "Yeah, long time no see, huh, Joe? Hey, we need your help, and Katie is out there looking for you right now," Hoagie called up to Joe. "Looking for me?" Joe was confused. "I'm so glad to see you, Hoagie. I didn't know if you and Katie made it out of Dart Island without getting hurt." Last time Joe saw Hoagie and Katie, they were on their way to an island rumored to be inhabited by spooky poison dart frogs. For some reason, nothing frightened Joe more than frogs and toads. "Oh, yeah, we're totally fine. It wasn't too bad over there. But you definitely have to watch out where you step, that's for sure. We actually met a very nice little old granny dart frog who helped us find Katie's parents." "You sure are brave, Hoagie. I could never go to a place with something so slimy, and their tongues are too long, in my humble opinion," Joe gasped. "They have long tongues for a reason, Joe. They only catch small insects with their large tongues. Plus, I don't know if their skin is really slimy. I think they're just wet from living in water," Hoagie said. "I hope you didn't touch them, Hoagie. Even if their skin isn't slimy, they have strange colors and rashes all over their body. Very unsightly," Joe squirmed. "They don't have rashes. Their skin is only bumpy. In fact, they're quite pretty and colorful. Nobody talks about your color being strange or weird, Joe," Hoagie said. "Because my coloring isn't weird, that's why. And I never jump out and scare people like the frogs do. They're a little too sneaky for their own good." Joe was getting scared just talking about frogs. "They don't jump out at people. In fact, they are so shy they hide most of the time. They're probably more afraid of you than you are of them," insisted Hoagie. "I don't think they could ever be more shy or more afraid than I am." Joe was thinking about a recent nightmare he had when he was being licked by a gigantic toad, and he trembled. "Look, Joe, everyone is different. Some of us are smaller, more furry, and smart." Hoagie was talking about himself, of course. "And others are tall and feathery, slimy, bumpy, or silly. That's what makes the world an exciting place. Plus, you shouldn't judge someone based on what they look like. I think it would do you a little good to explore different places so you can meet interesting creatures. You should travel more so you can see the world, Joe," said Hoagie. Our flock travels sometimes," Joe said. "I believe you'll find that most other animals aren't so scary after all, once you get to know them." Hoagie had learned that himself. "I don't know. It depends on if I meet any frogs," Joe said. "Actually, Katie and I were wondering if you would like to go on a little adventure with us. That's why Katie was looking for you," remarked Hoagie. Then he added, "I don't know if you'll meet any frogs, Joe, but the more you see 'em, the more you get used to the idea." Suddenly, the branch Joe was perched on made a loud crack, and the limb broke, crashing below. Joe jumped off just in time and fluttered to the ground. Hoagie darted down the tree after him. "Doesn't it sound like fun, Joe? We thought I could ride on your back and Katie could swim." "Fun? What's so fun about going out into the unknown? We might get lost and hurt, or something even worse." Flamingo Joe was a little afraid of new things. "Seeing new places, meeting new people is fun, Joe. Plus, getting lost isn't so bad if you have someone to get lost with," Hoagie insisted. Flamingo Joe didn't understand Hoagie's need to travel and see new things. Joe was perfectly happy being a member of his flock, safely dwelling on the mudflat where he was born. The flamingo colony, or PAT as it was called, flew together, ate together, and kept watch together. "And how are you going to fly on my back, Joe?" "And how are you going to fly on my back, Hoagie? I've never had a round creature on my back before. What if you're too heavy and you roll off?" Joe asked. "I beg your pardon? Round?" Hoagie usually got very upset if anyone talked about him being too fluffy or plump, but he had never been called round before. Instead of arguing, though, Hoagie crawled up Joe's leg and sat on his feathery back. "Am I heavy, Joe? Tell me the truth," Hoagie said. Joe had to admit Hoagie was lighter than he looked. Maybe he was just fluffy after all. "I guess you're not so heavy, but how far will we go?" "We want to explore the lands and waters past Dart Island, but first we were wondering if you could take a peek to see what else is out there. We would like an island with tons of fruit to eat, shade to nap in, and nice animals to meet," Hoagie said. Joe suddenly realized he was starving, so rather than think too much about it, he quickly agreed. "Sure, Hoagie, I can check it out. No problemo," Joe said quickly and got ready to take flight. "Wait, Joe! Can you find Katie first, please? Tell her I already spoke with you and she can come back home." Once Flamingo Joe took to the air, Hoagie lay in the tall grass and munched on whatever he could find. He began to daydream about sleeping in a bed of soft flamingo feathers. Hoagie suddenly felt homesick once again. Almost every day Hoagie thought about his human girl and his old life. He had missed her so much in the early days of getting lost. Hoagie wondered what his girl was doing now. Did she look different? Did she miss him like he missed her? Even though he had lived in a cage, his girl would take him out and let him roam around her room. Sometimes she would place him in her comfy bed and let him crawl under her warm blankets. Other times his girl would simply put him on her shoulder and he would stay perched there for a long time. The most exciting time he had back then was when he was allowed outside to roll in his purple hamster ball and explore. Sometimes she would put him out in the backyard. Other times she would take him to school with her, and he'd roll all over the floor listening to the happy squeals of the human children. He had a good, easy life back then. Hoagie was beginning to feel sorry for himself when suddenly he heard some very loud barks and whistles in the distance. Lickety-split, Hoagie took a flying leap, curled up into a tiny ball, and tumbled as quick as lightning. He had been practicing his somersaults and was able to roll in different directions. With Hoagie's amazing tumbling skills, he returned to the capybara village in a matter of seconds. Hoagie unraveled himself, stretched his back, and rubbed his eyes. What he saw next almost froze him with fear. Chapter 6. Dots. Once Hoagie got to the village, he noticed little capybaras running this way and that. They had gathered on one side of a small pond. The adults started forming a large circle with their heads facing outward and were calling to the younger ones to gather inside their circle. All the capybaras were bobbing their heads up and down and whipping from side to side. The elders were stomping, barking, and making quite a ruckus. The group sounded like a bunch of wild dogs. Hoagie quickly made his way into the middle of the circle where the younger capybaras were being protected. He hopscotched on a bunch of cappies until he finally landed onto Mama Kinsey's rump. Once he climbed on top of her head, Hoagie frantically looked to and fro. He was looking for Dots, the ocelot who once chased him into the lake. An animal was slowly creeping, its lanky body laying low to the ground. Not a sound could be heard as its footsteps were light as snowflakes. However, the cappies could not be fooled because they had an excellent sense of smell and the creature could not hide its sour scent. In the shadows, Hoagie spied a glimpse of dark, furry spots, and that's when he realized the predator was Dots after all. "There! She's there!" Hoagie hollered, pointing at Dots. Immediately, all the older cappies formed a straight line looking toward the bush. The pups hid behind them, shivering with fear. Hoagie said to Mama Kinsey, "Let me try to talk to her." Slowly, Mama Kinsey took one small step away from her herd, and Hoagie stood up tall on her head. He cleared his throat and spoke in his most confident, fancy voice. "Dots, we all know you're here. We can see you hiding, and we can smell you, of course." Hoagie knew he shouldn't upset Dots by talking about her stinkiness, but he couldn't help it. Hoagie continued, It would be best if you just moved along, 'cause there are more of us than there is of you. Nobody wants any trouble." Two large orange eyes appeared as Dots came out of the bushes, and the capybaras barked and grunted loudly. They were surprised to see such a strong adult ocelot in the daylight. Usually they hunted during the evening, and they were rare in the capybara area. Dots hissed. "I'm teaching my baby to hunt, Morsel, so I need to take up the chase. You and I both know water pigs can't fight me with their dull rodent teeth. So why don't you be a good boy and give me what I need, huh? I prefer one of the younger ones, if you don't mind. You can spare a young one, can't you?" The ocelot licked her lips. "You know we aren't going to give you anyone, Dots," Hoagie replied. "Oh, if you are unwilling to give, I guess I'll just have to take." Dot slinked closer. Hoagie knew he was dealing with a very dangerous predator, so he had to think fast before she got too close. "And where's your baby, Dots? Why chase if your kitten can watch? I have a feeling you are hunting just for yourself," Hoagie said. "Don't you worry, Morsel. My kitten isn't far behind." "Are you sure about that, Dots?" "Maybe it's sleeping in its den. Or maybe it's not," Hoagie continued. "What do you know about my baby, Morsel?" Dots hissed. "Well, for one thing, I know it's a girl kitten, and she loves to get lost while chasing things. But mostly, I know that she loves making new friends." Hoagie winked at her. Now Dots was getting angry that Hoagie was playing with her. She was also concerned and worried that Hoagie knew so much about her kitten. She made sure their lair was in a safe spot, far away from other animals. Dots came closer, baring her pointy teeth. "You've gone too far, Morsel," Dots sneered. Hoagie bent down to Mama Kinsey's ear and whispered, "When I put up my paw, I want all of you to go scattering in different directions with your pups. Then you can all make your way to the lake and hide under the thick branches. If we're lucky, she'll chase me first." Hoagie jumped off Mama Kinsey's head and walked toward Dots. Even though he felt nervous, he knew his plan to distract Dots would work. "Are you confused, Dots? Wondering where your baby is? Well, I can show you. But, I don't know, Dots. I was too fast for you last time. I don't know if you'd be able to keep up," Hoagie teased. "Ho! Last time I had a belly full of lizards, so I was running a bit slower than usual. This time I am starving, and nothing makes a cat more quick." Dot smiled wickedly. The mother ocelot licked her lips, thinking how juicy and tasty Hoagie would be. Hoagie was also imagining what it'd be like to be on a platter as Dot's dinner. A slight tremor went through his little itty-bitty body. "Shall I count down?" Hoagie asked. "Do as you like," Dots answered. "A 1, a 2, Hoagie began, and right before he said 3, Hoagie lifted up his tiny paw and the capybaras all scattered in different directions. Dots looked so confused and suddenly felt something running underneath her belly. It was small and furry. It was Hoagie. Hoagie made a mad dash away from the pond and toward the forest. He knew the cappies were making their way to the lake where they would be able to hide safely. Dots couldn't believe what had just happened. She had been tricked by the tiny hamster once again. Dots whirled around and chased after Hoagie. She was surprised how quickly he could move. He zigzagged around trees, burrowed under fallen limbs, and climbed up vines too thin for a big ocelot to hang on to. Hoagie used his hide-and-go-seek skills and hid in small spaces, calling out, "Yoo-hoo!" and Dots raced towards him. Then he scurried to another smaller hiding place and called out again. Dots was never able to catch him because Hoagie was either too fast, too small, or too smart. Eventually, the two enemies reached a dark wooded area close to the ocelot's den. Dots could immediately smell her kitten nearby. She quickly forgot about Hoagie and didn't even think about going back to the lake where she was sure the capybara herd had retreated to. Instead, all she could think about was her baby. Swiftly, Dots ran toward their lair. "Adios, Dots! Say hello to Squirt for me," Hoagie called out before he turned and sprinted back home. Squirt? Who's that? Dots wondered. When she reached their den, she found her baby curled up, sleeping soundly as only kitties do. Dots began licking Squirt and snuggled up next to her. Dots didn't know how that annoying furry creature she called Morsel knew where her den and baby were. Right then and there, Dots vowed to hunt him down if it was the last thing she did.